feel that. Just honored to be here to share this with you. Feel honored to have this discussion today, which may ruffle a few feathers. This is maybe the part where we don't agree on everything. Maybe you're going, hey, that's been all week. I haven't been agreeing with it. I'm still here. And that's okay. That's good. Let's have discussion. Let's do it in a way that is healthy for each other, in a way that we can grow, so we can understand and know, hey, I just said that today's the day we're not going to disagree a little bit together. We can argue. We can. Yeah. In a healthy way. He's my bouncer, by the way. So if you get too out of line, you may. No, just kidding. It's going to be a great day. We're going to throw out some different ideas of things that I've used in the past, churches that I've been in leadership in, and churches that I've been consulting with and working with. Some things that we've done to help bridge some of these generational gaps and change the narrative that we see right now of the church being less and less effective at reaching Gen X, Y, and Z in particular. Okay? That does not mean, it just does not mean that there's less of a focus or value on baby boomers or on maturest generations. We see a trend, and we looked at some of those stats. We're going to look at it again as a recap today. The Gen X, Y, and Z are leaving the church or not coming to church, or we're not being effective or as effective in reaching them at an alarming rate, for sure. And so that's really where we're going to focus some of this. But again, please understand, this is that focus, but it is by no means a decrease in value for our maturest and our baby boomers. I hope you hear my heart in that. I hope you've heard that all week long. I love what we do life together. I personally love that there are 5 generations present, rubbing shoulders with each other in our homes and in our communities and in our workplaces, and especially in our churches. The churches that I tend to gravitate to love being at, are churches that are generationally diverse. So that's my heart. Some people don't necessarily want that. They want, they desire more, they're a younger demographic and they just want to have that. And that's okay too. We talked about that yesterday, right? Or, we're a traditional church and we love the traditional values, and if younger people don't want to come to that, or less young people want to come to that, that's okay. This is who we're going to be. That's all right too, in my mind. It's not the church that I would gravitate to. I like that we have generations present here, for sure. A little less now because of COVID, so we have less of the younger people with kids programming and youth this year, but that's a church that I love. So again, the disclaimer is we're going to focus on how can we be effective in reaching Gen X, Y, and Z, but please don't feel like that's a devalue of the oldest generations, but more of a value that we can learn about how to do life in church together. We'll pray, and then we're going to recap a couple things to level set and then dive into this discussion. All right. God, thanks for this time, this last day, this Friday here, just talking about what does 5 generational leadership look like in our homes, in our workplaces, in our culture, and especially in our churches. And I pray that you would give us discerning ears and hearts that are open to some new ideas and some new ways to think about the things that are on our heart. Our heart to just reach more people for Christ and to solve a little bit more of the problem that we see all around us of people just not desiring to go to church or not coming to church. And we want people to know you and to grow in the relationship with you. And so with this discussion in this room right here in Okoboji, just move the needle a little bit. We love you. That's why we're here. Amen? Amen. Okay, so throughout the conference here, session 2 through now, we've taken a little bit of time right at the beginning just to remind ourselves to go back and recap some of the things, and it's a really quick overview. Sometimes it's because we've had a few new faces in and haven't been in other sessions, and so it's a little bit of a recap and get up to speed with that. I also have said each day that this is as much for me as it is for you, and that is so true. When I got up this morning, the first thing I did was got coffee. The second thing I did was go to the bathroom, and the third thing I did was go through this. Go through this just as a reminder. This is how I started my day. And then went and spent some time with God and asked Him to bless this time, pray for my family, pray for some of the churches that I'm working with. And then I got to eat some breakfast, which was great, okay? So this is as much for me as it is for you. But it's also for you, because we know, especially because of the scene that we are living in, you need to hear things 7, 8, or even 9 times before you remember it and can apply it, or before it makes a difference. So we've been going through this, and we keep recapping some things. I'll say a statement that I said the first part of this week. We're going to be like, yeah, we got that. But actually, in 3 months, in order for you to have gotten that, or to get that, or to make it really valuable in your life, you got to hear it again. So don't tune out this. This is for you, so that this stuff can tip the needle in your life first. Because again, the foundation of all of this is self-leadership. You want to bridge generational gaps? It starts with you. Yeah.
As I've been thinking about the days we've been here and today, I have the privilege to teach classes. Probably the average age is, I would guess, 70.
Yeah.
As I've been thinking about this and last night thinking about it, and one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to church, is see if I can get audience of some of the high school age, for example, college age, just meet with them and say, so how can we, those of us in the 60s, 70s, 80s, how can we do a better job of connecting and relating to you? Give us some ideas, because I don't think we do it very well. And I'm really anxious to find out what I can hear from the people in the high school, college age group.
By you just saying I don't think we do it very well,
I don't think, I need to speak for myself.
Sure.
I don't do it very well.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's wise. I think having them know we could do better and we want to do better. So can we learn from you? Again, that's been what we've talked about for 4 days. That is bridging generational gaps. So way to go. Way to go. All right, here it is. That's the statement. No matter your age, your position in work or in life, your personality, your spiritual gifts, or whatever else you choose to put on that list. Is there something on that list that means something to you? My belief is that not only are we all leaders, and I believe you are, but the leadership is actually in each of your calling. And a quick summary from some of scriptures that you're created in His image. And He said, man, you are very good. And then He declared we have a hope and a calling. That's part of our vision for this conference. You have a hope and you have a calling. And as we live our lives worthy of that calling, we are actually God's masterpiece. By the way, some of you have asked this throughout the week. I wear that on my arm. For we are God's masterpiece. No matter what you believe about tattoos, or whatever, when I wake up in the morning, every morning with self-doubt, saying, can I really give something that's valuable to a group of wise people? And I'm brushing my teeth or drinking my coffee, it's staring me in the face. God says, you know what? You may not be able to, but through me, you're my masterpiece. So you got this. Let's go have some discussion. Let's go move the needle. So important in my life, and I want it to be important in your life. Now, we get to be difference makers in the world. We get to lead them in love. And showing them what it looks like to love God in our own lives, and showing them what it looks like to love others. And that, by the way, is a value for most of the U.S. population, no matter what generational gap you're in. Love is a value. You want to reach younger generations? Share how you're loving other people. That is so important. So important. You want to reach a millennial who would never come through your doors? Talk about how you love someone who wasn't in your doors, in the workplace, or someone who is different than you, who you don't maybe even agree with, but you love them. That's the way to bridge a generational gap, for sure. For sure. So important. generational chart just to make sure we're all on the same page of what the generations that I'm referring to as the 5-generational world. There's even more generations, by the way, that are present. These are ones that regularly rub shoulders with each other. I've got the Maturists pre-1945, as we looked at one of the statistics yesterday. They actually break that up into 2 different generations, that if they're at 97 years old and older is actually a subset of this generation. I'm just grouping that all together because it's less than 1% of our current population, and I don't regularly rub shoulders with someone who's 98, 99, 100 plus years old. I love when I get to. Right? And then same thing with our absolute youngest. They are in the youngest part of Gen Z right now, and there's going to be a double A, or I don't know what they're going to say next. So there's going to be more than 5 generations, but this is 5 generations that are present, that are at least formative ages and can function and interact with each other. So here's the 5 generations, and we've come back to this every single day. And again, there's different names for some of these depending on who does the studies or who you're talking to. Maturists, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, or Gen Z. We're laid out the current scene. This is so important. We're going to talk about it. We're going to refer to it today. This scene is our litmus test. As we make changes, which is what we need to do, otherwise we're going to continue on the trajectory that we are. As we make changes, this should be our litmus test. This should be the lens that we look through as we're putting together strategies and as we're dreaming about things that we can or should or might do. Does it fit into this scene, or does it not? Or petting the cat backwards or forward? Right? Petting the cat backwards isn't fun for you or the cat. Right? So don't do that. Pet the cat the same direction that it likes to. It's fun for you too. Right? You're going to have a great experience with that cat. If you pet it backwards one time, you're going to know about it. Maybe for a week or more. You'll feel the effects of that. Right? Here's the scene that we get to just use as our litmus test, or the lens, or the thing that we get to bounce the idea off of if we're dreaming. We live in a world of speed. That's just so true. So true. It makes it so difficult to lead. Speed, convenience. Convenience is all around. If it's not easy, it's not going to work. Not to start. We're not talking about the people who are in our churches right now. We're talking about the people who aren't currently in our churches. If it's not easy for them, they're not going to continue to come. Or they're not going to come at all. Okay? Entertainment. That's so important in our culture. There's high stimuli all around us. It's true. Whether it's good or whether it's not. There's other things vying for their attention, so we need to capture their attention, even if it's only for an hour. And we need to be intentional about what that attention looks like, or we're going to lose them. Once we get them in the doors, which is a huge battle, they're not going to come back. They're not going to stay. They're not going to be sticky. Because there's all these other things that are vying for their attention that they're so used to. Nurturing the environment. You don't show that you care in an authentic way, that they don't. I mean that. If you don't show them that you care about them in an authentic way, they'll see right through that. They'll go someplace that does show that they care. It's all over it. They can get it digitally if they want. And then entitlement. We live in a society that is entitled, that feels a sense of entitlement. And that's what we get to brush up against. It's a challenge. Bridge some of these generational gaps and culture gaps by knowing your story. If you haven't completed that exercise and just taken a few minutes and actually know some markers in your story that have helped develop you, do that. Do that. I'd say at least half of my connection with you guys outside of this has been about this story piece. Greg and I were even saying, hey, we have something similar in our stories. That's something I shared. It was like, oh, yeah, actually. Right? It's been the same a few different times. We have some similar things in our story where we bridge generational gaps by knowing your story, you know it really well, and being the absolute best communicator of your story that you could ever even imagine, and then some. Get amazing at telling your story. Know yourself. know yourself and grow yourself, right? Know and grow, and then you can know and grow others. This is one way that I use to help invest in other people, to grow them. Use this in my life to help me know myself more. I get to see pastors and church leaders all the time, including staff that I have led. I mean, high-level staff that I've led, that are just amazing leaders, get to know who they are a little bit more, who God's created them to be. Because that's so important. I don't want to build a strategy with you if you don't even know who you are. Because as you figure that out, the strategy is going to change. So let's lay a foundation right here. Know your spiritual gifts. Know your Enneagram. There's a generational gap bridge right there. So know your Enneagram. Myers-Briggs, how you perceive the world and make decisions. What your temperament is. That affects how you communicate and how you like to be communicated to. That's so huge. And then strengths finders, what's your talent DNA? Just 5. You remember 5 strengths that you have and 5 strengths that the person that you're leading has, or the person that's leading you has. You can do that. It's a 5-section profile and instrumental in building a good idea of who I am and good idea of who the people that I work with are. 4-dimensional, 5-generational leadership was a whole session, by the way, so I'm going to recap it in 2 minutes. But the 4-dimensional piece is you got to lead in, we just talked about that, but you also have an opportunity and a responsibility to lead up to those who lead you. Not just to take directives from them, but to lead up to them. And lead out to peers of yours, organizationally peers, or in your family units, right? People who are also maybe in the same industry as you, so lead out to them and lead down those people who we normally think of leading. So you've got people on that list, we actually wrote down some of their names. Recap their names. These people are important. And then the 5-generational piece of that is we also can do this in a generational sense. And I can lead up to the generation that's above me. Been doing that with people with you guys. I've heard stories about how you're doing that as well in your churches and in your families and workplaces, and I absolutely love that. That may be even more important for younger generations to know. They can lead up and we want them and need them to lead up to us. But you can also lead out. I've learned more from the people I went through seminary with, right? Not the ones that I took a class from. Learn more from the people I went through a master's program with. Learn more from the people who are in the same age group as me and demographic that we do small group with than any book that I've read, or lecture I've sat through, or workshop or conference or anything. So lead out, that is so important. Learn what you can from those in your same generation. And invest in them. And let them know what you've been learning. Have dialogue with them. And then lead down. Lead down the generations that are below you. Mentor, coach, be a part of people's lives who are younger than you, in a different generational age than you are, as often as you can. Don't ever miss an opportunity to do that. If you can coach or mentor somebody, even if it's for 1 minute, if it's for a day, a week, a season, a lifetime, if you have that opportunity and they're giving you that trust and respect, and they want that from you, do it. Do it any chance that you get, please. That's so important. So important in our churches. We talked about the role of the local church in a 5-generational world based on the questions you asked, and we just broke down the word church, right? Word church, ecclesia, which comes from 2 words, which means called out followers of Jesus. That is the church. That's the church that we read in the New Testament, in Scripture. And that doesn't go away. It's also the traditional church, it's the modern church, it's the mega church, it's the rural church, it's the church on the East Coast, the West Coast, around the world. That is the capital T church. We also use church to describe the organizations that we lead, and also the buildings at times. So we interchange that a lot because of our simple and complex English language, right? That is the church. When we talk about the capital T church, what are the called out ones? Should we focus on evangelism or discipleship?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's the answer. Yes, we should focus on discipleship and evangelism because in the Great Commission, those two things are synonymous with each other. So we looked at that Yesterday, brought the tone down a little bit. Had some bummer news, which we all knew, but we got some visuals to, bring our mood down even more of what it actually looks like out there. What it actually looks like in our churches. How many people from different generations actually go into church or have expressions of how they do faith, what that might look like. We can use some of this, by the way, as we develop strategies. We should use some of this as we develop strategies, for sure. So some of the things that I put out there today are because of some of the stats that we know. And I just threw out 3 different statistics. It's just the total population in the U.S. These are things that we should know as we build our ministries and our strategies for reaching people who aren't currently coming in our doors. Right? Now, there's all kinds of different strategies we can talk about with people who are in our doors that are maybe not coming as often. Well, maybe they come 1 or 2 times a year. How can we make that more often than 1 or 2 times a year? Can we make it sticky for them? How can we grow spiritually the people who are there? How can we make sure that as they go through hard times in life that they are cared for and come out on the other end ready to invest in the next generation or the next person who's going through that? There's all kinds of strategies around that, which is not where we're going to go with this today, I hope. Right? We're talking about people who aren't currently coming to church because they fall in the Gen X, Y, or Z generation that we know are skeptical. We know they're skeptical. Rightfully so for some. That we have this that we're working against, that millennials in particular see the church, the ones that aren't coming to church, see the church as judgmental, hypocritical, and anti-homosexual. That's the church capital T, by the way, Christians. That's what they see. And again, rightfully so. As we turn around, we look at millennials that aren't coming to church, who have these 1 or 2, or maybe they believe all 3 of these things about us. We've got to turn the table the other direction that we believe that about them. If we do, then maybe we need to slow our roll a little bit, look inside a little bit, grow spiritually a little bit. We would say, you know what? They are also God's masterpiece. We may disagree. I mean, I don't like them, but I am called to love them. And that means we got to embrace some of the mess, and we got to invite them in. We got to do church together. So we're talking about ways to invite them, or to meet them where they are, and hopefully, down the road, whether it's 1 day, 10 years, hopefully one day, they get to a point where some of these things they're not as skeptical about, or they don't believe quite so strongly about, and then they're willing to come through our doors. And when they come through the doors, we're ready to change their perspective. One of my favorite things to do was at Eagle Brook before this, right? And got to lead the campus, and so before the services started, I had all this ramp up, and I had this just like this, called the calm before the storm, right? Where I didn't have a whole lot of responsibility. My team was going crazy. They were running all over, getting people parked and kids checked in, and we had thousands of people coming through our doors, and it's like this hustle and bustle from the team. But my prep things had kind of been done. They were done. And so I was just there in a support role, and I was there to just experience and see and gain perspective. One of my favorite perspectives was when I see somebody walk through the door, and you could tell that they were new and they were expecting one thing. And when they came through the door, their experience was something different. That is a win. We broke down a barrier. And they may sit down in a seat, and they may just experience Jesus in a way they weren't expecting as well. Maybe that happens one time. Maybe it takes 10 times for them walking through the door. Maybe it takes 10 times over 10 years. And all of that was okay. All of that is a good thing. If they're moving, if they're taking some steps, if they're actually coming in the doors. You gotta do some things to actually get them there as well. Okay, before I go on, I'm gonna throw some things out there, some different things that I've used in the past, churches that I've led, churches I'm consulting with that have actually moved this needle. Before we get there, that was a lot, so just like breathe. Any thoughts? Is this daunting for anybody? Maybe look at all that and go, can we do this?
Yesterday, or last evening, there was a friend of ours here that had her niece with her,
Yeah.
who is going into her first year of college this month. And so I started talking to her, and she works at Hidden Acres, if you guys know where that Christian camp is, over by Ames Island, and is a camp counselor for the last couple of years. And so I was asking her about her life and what was going on, and she asked me then what I was doing here at the conference and all that, so I told her about this class. And so I was telling her about this particular point, and I said, tell me, what would you think that your generation thinks about, the next generation in our churches and what keeps them from coming to church? Now, I know she goes to church, so. And I said, there's 3 things. And I said, can you tell me any of them? And she said, yeah. She says, it's judgment and the anti-sexual thing, that we're not open to that. She said, I'm not either. I mean, I'm not for that. But she said the very same thing, we need to love them and let God work in their heart. And I thought, oh man, she just said them all. She never did the 3rd one, but she got to do the 2nd one. So it was really fun to talk to her about that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Gen Z. Yeah. Yeah, great.
Yeah, there's a saying that you love the person and hate the sin.
Sure. Yeah.
I was only able to be here yesterday and today, but I was most challenged yesterday actually with the lead-up component. And that was challenging to me because I'm starting to be at the age where the leading up, there's not as many opportunities to lead up. But I throw out that one of the pieces of the puzzle, I was challenged about the lead up to help re-engage those who say, I have retired, including ministry. It's for others now. And so how to have some of this be exciting to help them re-engage and have purpose.
There you go.
Back to the how to engage the young people challenge, like the young lady you were just talking about. The barrier that I see is the worldview difference. That you're speaking in some cases to people who do not believe in the authority of the Bible.
Right.
They believe that abortion is fine. And they believe that if you don't tolerate homosexuality, and that's not just loving the sinner and hating the sin, but they almost want to embrace the sin that they don't want to have a part of you.
Celebrate gay marriage, not just tolerate it.
So those are the barriers that I think we have to deal with. And it's pretty hard once you get a person like that in the church and you say, okay, the absolute truth is the Bible, and they go, don't believe that. You've got to deal with that worldview difference, I think.
There's a worldview difference. I think that's one of the big things that we need to be open to, is to understand we have a worldview. As believers, we have one worldview, and if it's different than someone who you're inviting in, then you need to invite that difference in and be able to discuss it without saying, I hear you that we have a different worldview, but I'm telling you, you're wrong. And I'm going to tell you all the reasons that you're wrong. Because then they're going to go,
You're judgmental.
great, we have one discussion, and you confirm my skepticism about what I was going to experience, and I'm out. Right? But instead, you say, hey, I hear your worldview, and I don't really agree, obviously, we know that, right? But I'd love to learn from you why. I'd love to learn from you why you believe that, or how you got there. What does that mean? How does that actually guide your life? That is so important. I've heard from I had a person that I knew in college. I was a friend. We've been in the same circles together. Kind of, as normal after college, just, we went and did our own things. She was down in Nashville and she got married, and, I've been all over the country, and she lives in Minneapolis now, and came up on my social media and found out that she's in she's a Christian. She claims to be Christian. She, a worship leader. She is in a marriage. She's got a son and a stepson as well, and she claims to be bisexual. And I just reached out to her and I said, Amy, like, that doesn't add up to me. I don't understand it. I would love to just learn from you. How do you function like that? How do you go about doing life like that? Posting what you do, which is some deep spiritual truth, by the way. Posting what you do on social media, but yet we're so far off on this. Teach me what you believe in that. How does that guide you? And it has been amazing. I still don't understand. I really don't. But it's opened up my worldview to understand that there is a different worldview. It doesn't change my worldview, but to understand there's a different worldview I didn't even know existed. And those are the people that I'm rubbing shoulders with. And they can understand a little bit more of what I believe in life. And so can I. That's so important. They didn't close the conversation door to say, hey, well, we don't agree. It opened.
When you knew her before, she obviously did not believe that.
I don't know if she believed that. We had never talked about it. It wasn't open.
You don't know that. It's just, but you had known her before, though, right?
Yeah.
Where that change comes is what I would find.
Yeah, we haven't got there yet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But plan to. Yeah. Yeah, she's interested in how I can, lead and be, part of a mega church. She sees the value of community and home group and things like that. We've had some awesome discussion about that. Even though we're literally so far apart on this thing, as far as I can tell. We haven't really got all the way there yet.
This is the first I've sat in, but I hear people sometimes describe Christians as haters.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we mentioned that before, but
It's-
and then you bring it out
fits
as
in.
well, of course.
Yeah, that fits in. One more, and then let's get to this.
Well, I retired many years ago, and I thought it was wonderful, because then I could get involved in the church and
Yeah.
volunteer. And that's when I went into the mentor group.
Yeah.
And that is all what you said. You listen to their story, and then, because they want to tell it to someone,
Yeah.
and then that's how you help them. And
Yeah.
then you tell your story, you bring them on board, and
You are great at telling your story, which is they're actually interested in, and you are great at being curious and asking questions, and maybe, especially if it's a Gen Zer, because they're not great at communicating verbally yet. Digitally, they might be, but in a face-to-face conversation, a lot of them just really aren't great face-to-face communicators. And you get really good at being curious and asking questions that pull their story out of them. Once you get them talking, I hope you don't have an appointment to get to,
Yeah.
because they don't keep talking. They are. It is amazing. You may have to pull it out of them, and that means you need to put some tools in your toolbox to be able to have those conversations. And by the way, we talked about some personality types and introverts versus extroverts, right? I'm an introvert, right? Everything in the introvert category says that you're not supposed to be that great at initiating conversation with people who you don't know. I'm also an introvert who loves people and has been in an extrovert's role for as long as I can remember. And in an extrovert's family, by the way, because I'm Greek. Introverts don't fit in a Greek family, right? So I get it. I get that this could be tough for some people. I get that if you're like, that's just not me socially. But if you can put some tools in your toolbox, then it doesn't have to be something that's socially awkward for you, but you have a place to start. If it doesn't work, then gain some more tools, or try again. I get that, I do. All right, this concept of growing young was thrown out there on our first day, and I just love it, so I pulled up a graphic, growing young. And here's a few things, again, this is a few things that I have used in churches that I've either led, and these are churches from 400 people to 35,000, and in between. They're churches in a major metro, in a more of a rural setting, California to Minnesota, right? And there are also things that have worked in churches that I've been consulting with and coaching with in Texas and on the East Coast. These are not things that are all going to fit for you and for your church and your leadership. There's some ideas. One of my coined sayings that I come back to all the time, if you watch any of the video series that I put out, I have a video series called Coach's Corner. I just say, I'm just here to give you some regular thoughts and inspiration to help you hit play instead of hitting pause. Okay? Some of these things are just to help you not pause or stall, but to help you continue to hit play and being effective in making some of the changes that I'm hearing some of you already doing. So way to go in already doing some of these things. And these can be just a little jump start to other things and redirections to help you not just pause and stall out as a church, because I don't want that. You don't want that. God doesn't want that from you. Let's be effective in reaching generation. Here are some things, and then we'll have some discussion about it. If you're not programming and budgeting for that generation X, Y, and Z, you're not going to reach them. Program and budget. Which is hard because the majority of that budget comes from giving, not from X, Y, and Z. The main reason for that is that they're not coming to your church. Okay, so it means reallocating budget and redoing some of our programs and strategies to reach X, Y, and Z if your heart is to reach them. If your heart is not to reach them, be a church that excels at leading in spiritual growth for baby boomers and for maturists, this doesn't apply. And that is okay, by the way, which we talked about yesterday. If that is your church and your DNA, that is okay. You also need to know that part of the vision of your church is to be a church that's dying, which is also okay. Not every church has to last for 500 years. We're talking about church organization, not the church, right? Not every church needs to last for hundreds of years. They just don't. We have new churches being planted all the time that are being birthed all the time. New leadership, and that's okay. That's hard to hear sometimes. I get that. I've fought against that at times, churches that I've led or consulted with. I've got, no, you're paying me to come in here and analyze and look at the overall structure and make some changes, and really what I want to tell you is you're a church that's going to excel at ending well. And that's your vision. So I'd say be ready to have that conversation. And if that is your church, then how do you pass the baton well when you do finish well? That might be your calling and your vision as a church. It might not be. I don't think that's the vast majority, by the way. If you all leave here and you're like, ooh, he gave us permission to just forget the X, Y, and Z generation, just keep doing what we're doing. That's not my heart. But I'm just saying that might be the case for some churches. Little blanket statement.
Travis, just a really quick question.
Yeah.
I'm treasurer for our church. We use QuickBooks. On that first bullet point, did those people actually go in and reorganize their chart of accounts when they did their budget? Did they say we used to have these budget expense accounts, and now because we're growing young, we broke it all out into this kind of?
No, we're talking about a vision piece. We're talking about a vision piece because I would say this: if you have a demographic in your church that's giving a certain percentage and they're requiring or requesting a certain percentage of that back to that generation to serve them, you got way more things out of whack than what we're going to talk about here today. And I will come in and I'm going to be happy to help us new vision into that and show the value. And usually it's just a matter of, well, this is one way that we've been doing it, and it just kind of morphed into it, but we're not really being intentional in it. Okay? But it is not uncommon. I came to a church who had 4 services. 3 of them were geared toward reaching X, Y, and Z. One of them was a traditional service. The other 3 services combined had about 1,400 people going to them. The traditional service was on Sunday morning right away first and had less than 100 people going to it. They had more staff for the traditional service than they had for the other services that were there. Again, reaching 100 people or less versus 1,400 people on average. And separated. It wasn't one church, it was two separate churches. With one pastor who oversaw that and one board that oversaw these two different organizations. That's really what was going on. And again, if that's what you want to do as a church, well, that's what you want to do as a church. But when they brought me in, this was something that they had never even thought about. Like, well, why wouldn't we just take the offering from this traditional service and allocate it all toward this? And I was like, well, how much time do we have? You know, this is a great discussion. This is a great discussion. If you want to be a church that is traditional, then that's fine. If you want to be a church that is whatever this other modern style that they were going for is, and that's great. If you want to keep them separated, then let's just be honest with ourselves and intentional and separate them.
But I heard you saying about do you actually realign your budget, even the chart of accounts, so it matches this new vision you have? If you're going to reach millennials, you're going to reach X, Y, and Z, do you actually realign your budget, your chart of accounts, everything, so that it actually goes in that same
We'll
direction?
talk a little bit about this, but I think we need to simplify our budgets, by the way, and I think you're going to kill a whole lot of budget lines, and I do think that you're going to add a couple that you didn't have before, like maybe a digital communication budget line. That maybe doesn't exist right now and just kind of gets taken out of a outreach fund or whatever it might be, but the simple church model we talked a little bit about yesterday. I don't know who brought that up, but do less things. Do less things. We all do way too many things if we're going to be effective. We got to talk about how to simplify some of that. So that's reallocating some of those budget lines is having less budget lines. I don't know, how many budget lines do you have?
I would say probably 50 expense counts.
And how many categories are in there? Is that from?
Right, yeah, no, good question. So we have adult ministries,
Yeah.
we have music ministry, we have Sunday morning ministry, we have children's ministry, and youth ministry. And then general.
And then what?
Just general salaries, payroll.
Operating expenses.
Operating expenses, yes.
So you have 6 categories and 50 budget lines.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah. Is that a lot, or is that a
Well,
little?
that's astronomical.
Well, just so you know, I inherited it. I didn't inherit it. I'm just managing it.
Yeah. We are stewards of every dollar that is given and every dollar that is spent. And so we need to have a system that tracks all of that and helps us be wise and be stewards of all of that. And if 100 lines is what it takes to be able to do that effectively, then 100 lines is what it is. But I think the reason that there's probably 50 is because someone had a good idea, which can be good, and we ended up putting some funds to it, and now that thing has its own little life of its own, and whether you're above or below on that budget line is something that someone else has to keep track of. All good things, by the way, are not all God things. You may have a lot of really good ideas for your church. I'm throwing some of them out here. Man, if you all left here and you all tried to implement all of these, we're going to have a whole lot of churches that are failing. Let's not do that. And so, man, I think editing a budget is horrible work. It is hard work, but it takes vision first. And then you start aligning the budget with that. I mean, I think if you have more than 20 lines, budget lines to keep track of, it's probably too much. I don't know your church in detail, but
Appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. There's one back here. And let's keep
So
going.
I'm curious, did this church stay like two separate churches yet in the same building, or did they combine and change vision?
You know, one of the fun things, one of the reasons I use them as an example, is that I actually got to have a small, it was less people than this, but just little workshop, if you will, a session with 2 of the church board members, the lead pastor, the music director who oversaw the traditional service, and then myself. We sat on a little panel and we had a room, and I got to just talk about the why. Why are we going to make some pretty big wholesale changes and you're not going to have $1 million budget for 80 people who are coming to a service, and where we're going to reallocate that, and how what you're doing is actually going to reach more people. And it was a buzz. It's like I said, hey, we're going to have some free coffee for you. Well, we did offer free coffee. Maybe that's why we had a buzz around there. This generation of people said, it's just something we did. thought it was a good idea, and it was, without it was working, so it's just something that just kept happening. Really, there was no intentionality behind it, at least not long term. Yeah, so we changed, we cast new vision for the church. The lead pastor had a great vision, he just didn't know how to communicate that. So we developed communication strategies and different ministries and budgets, and actually that the traditional worship director or music director, he went down part-time, realizing it's kind of part of his, he knew was coming for a long time, or felt was coming for a long time, he was prepared for it, and helped him transition into that really well, not just pull plug on his finances and have to take care of his family. I mean, it was a 2-year transition.
It's that old saying of a dying church, we've always done it this way.
Yeah, we've always done it this way.
Travis, as you go forward, just take note, everyone, that you are sitting in and part of an organization that used to teach women and men separately.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Here we are.
So let's keep going.
Here we are, yeah.
So going back to the circles with the hypocrisy and all of that stuff, there's roughly 20% of young people who don't think that, and maybe are still in the church. So
these are people who aren't in the church.
yeah. So would you, when you're working to get more young people, would you try to work in the realm of the worldview of the 20% or so of the youth that don't feel that way, or that they're still in the church, as opposed to acquiescing to the worldview of the people, of the ones who do think that way and aren't in the church, to try to draw them in?
That's a good question. I personally wouldn't. That would not be my main focus, and for a number of reasons, for sure, but we're not that far apart. And if they're maybe already growing other ways, they don't see us as judgmental, hypocritical, and homosexual, or whatever else we end up having this, again, it's like in 2014, so maybe even higher percentages than that. But we're not talking about a 20% problem here. We're talking about 90%, 85, 87% problem. This is almost everyone. And maybe even some people who didn't say that, so of conscience, and I feel dirty about saying that. I think that that churches are anti-homosexual. But really, I think that's probably true. But I'm not going to say anything in this study. I mean, that's got to be a percentage of this as well. 91% to me says that's everything. By doing next.
Digital strategies, because that's where they are. If they're not in your church building, they're online, some way, shape, or form, right? So we need to come up with some digital communication strategies, some ways to bridge some generational gaps digitally before they're ever going to walk through our doors and we can have an analog relationship. That's so hard, you guys. That is so hard. I would encourage every church that's growing in this area to have a staff member who is dedicated to digital communication, who is an amazing communicator and pastor, and who knows how to do that in a digital world. If you put a value on platform communication, a pastor who can really preach, who can really communicate well. You just heard Bob Merritt up there, right? Bob is an amazing communicator. It's one of his best gifts ever, right? Bob's a great communicator. You put him on a digital platform, it's not his thing. He's not going to excel there. But if you hired someone who is as good as Bob Merritt is on the platform to manage and to communicate and to reach people digitally, they're going to walk through your doors and they're going to hear Bob on the platform. Whoa, like, are we really talking about hiring somebody as a digital pastor or an online, or is this conversation that we're having? Yeah, it's 2020. Gen X, Y, and Z are not coming to our doors, so we're talking about how do we reach them so that we can eventually get them through our doors, so that we can help them take some steps in spiritual maturity and change some of their skepticism. And then when they come through our doors, what they experience is not what they were expecting. This gets me so fired up, you guys. Like, this is so huge. Yes?
I just went through a leadership meeting 2 weeks ago at my church, and I just about fell off my chair too, because the pastor said, we are going to be hiring somebody.
Yeah.
Because of COVID right now, we've got so many people online.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of new people, and they are going to go after those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's...
I love it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested in seeing how it'll all work out.
If you're taking notes, From Social Media to Social Ministry is a book. From Social Media to Social Ministry. It's written by Nona, N-O-N-A, Nona Jones. Nona Jones works for Facebook and leads the religious sector of this massive organization, Facebook. She also is a co-leader of a church with her husband down in Florida.
What's her name?
Nona Jones, N-O-N-A, Nona Jones. From Social Media to Social Ministry. And right away from the very beginning of this book, by the way, I've got the audio version of this that I'm planning to listen to again on my way back to Minneapolis, which is 3.5 hours long, the audio version, and my drive is like 3 hours and 30 minutes. It lines up. But I'm working with a church out in California who is just blowing this whole thing up, and I'm giving them all kinds of ideas and perspective, and we're about to build some strategies, and I want to go back through this and be on my game with it. So I'm in it with you, okay? It's about how to not just have a presence on social media. Your church may have a social media account, but how to actually make that social ministry. By the way, I'm not great at this. This is not my MO. I told you, I'm a people person. I like being in the space. I've been doing everything on Zoom for the last 5 months. I far prefer being in person, even if it means travel, right? The only thing about travel that I don't love is the plane flights and being away from my family. Everything else, I get to experience all of this, and you don't get to when you're in a digital world, but guess what? We're in a digital world, yeah.
Along the lines of the digital thing,
yeah.
COVID,
yeah.
How churches are being virtual. I'm a big podcast listener.
Yeah, likewise.
A huge list, and I go, even when we do have church, I'm in church 1 hour, 2 hours a week, but I'm consuming other stuff.
100.
Many more hours a week.
Yep.
So I kind of met with our pastor and said, especially during this time, we need to curate, because, maybe I shouldn't say this, but he was, during this time, he was getting a lot of emails saying, oh, I saw this podcast about this thing or that thing or this conspiracy theory or that conspiracy.
the value of someone who comes through seminary really needs to have a great biblical foundation. How do you condense that? We can't condense that any more than we've already condensed to make room for learning these strategies. So just beware.
I like that, Travis, because it goes with it. The body has many parts, right?
Yeah.
And there's a part for that.
It does.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though, too, and we've said this multiple times. Your body has different parts. If you're church leader or leaders have a seminary education and they're great communicators, they don't have to be the ones that are great communicators in a digital platform. What they need to do is they need to invest their vision into a pastor who is a great communicator in a digital platform. And then that pastor needs to carry that vision, just like the rest of your staff, by the way, just like your church board, by the way, and the attenders of your church, by the way. That staff member needs to just know that vision and be able to reproduce that in a way that makes a difference and tips the needle in a digital world for Gen X, Y, and Z. That's what we're talking about.
So how do you find those kind of people?
How do you find them? Yeah, well, to be honest, most of them, and this is just shooting straight with you, most of them don't come from a rural environment. Most of them come from the metro. Not all of them. No, by no means all of them, but most of them don't. Work with a recruiter. Recruiters will have a list of people who aren't qualified for senior level roles or they don't have a student ministry background, but they're creative and a digital, and they've got their resume out there and they're just looking for a place to start and belong. Work with a recruiter. Network with other churches. Go to your mega church, and say, you guys are doing amazing. Call up Fresh Life. I've called up Fresh Life. Call up Fresh Life and say, you guys are doing amazing. Where did you find that person? Oh, we grew them, or we heard about them, or we brought them in from California. Be ready to bring someone in from the East Coast or the West Coast. Be ready to bring someone in who's green, and by the way, who's going to make all kinds of mistakes. That's the next point. Be ready to embrace the mess. You hire someone who's really great at this, but isn't seasoned. Be ready to embrace the mess with this.
I was just going to say, if you have one of the 5% that don't think you're judgmental that's in your church and high school age, they'll be able to answer some of the questions.
Some of it, yeah, for sure. Put a strong focus on social justice. We've seen from generational charts and from what people are interested in things that make a difference for them. And there's like 2 or 3 focuses each 4th Sunday. That's what they do. And it's a great thing. I'm going to keep moving here, or we're never going to get through half of this, because we're 5 minutes and then done. Make sure your leadership reflects your vision. And I'm not talking about reflects your vision as in, yes, we agree with the vision that we're going. That's your church leadership casting vision, carrying vision or building vision, but reflects your vision. So if you want to be a multi-generational church, but you look around the leadership table and it's all people from the same generation, you will not be effective. No matter how much you want to bridge generational gaps, you won't be effective in bridging all of those gaps. Find wise people from other generations. If you want to be a multi-ethnic generation, you look around the table and it's a bunch of white guys, you're going to have a hard time paddling upstream against this single ethnic church demographic. You are. If you want to reach people who are in Gen X or Gen Y, well, you better get some family people in there. If you want to reach more women, you need to have some women in leadership. And whatever your view is of what Scripture says about the roles of women in the church and all that, every denomination has something different. Every person thinks differently, but it doesn't mean that women aren't leader. We see that in Scripture, and I've told you that throughout this week, that I see you gals as leaders. So come on, I'm inviting you. Be leaders. Be leaders in your church. Have influence. And maybe that doesn't mean you can't be a teaching pastor, or you can't be on the board. That doesn't mean that you're not a leader. It doesn't mean you can't influence. Please do that. We need you if we're going to be effective. We need people who are in generations that are below us, that are wise, and that check the boxes of good leaders. Don't just invite anybody, please. Get your, you should have a little bit of a checklist, a little bit of how we can invite people, what they should be. So there are spiritually mature people who are in younger generations than you, that are in younger generations than me. Remember, I'm on the very upward end of millennial. There are wise people in the Gen Z category. They should be reflected in our leadership, and especially in the decisions that we make. As a church leadership team, if we were trying to do something that was outside of our level of expertise, where we felt like we really had a good handle on this, we brought in somebody who was an expert, and sometimes that means
our ideas might not be their ideas. Make sure your leadership reflects that. Be okay with attenders. Treating church as a spectator event until they feel a sense of belonging. I'm telling you guys, if you do all the things and you finally get them through the doors, or if they're just walking by sometime and they thought they were going to the post office and they're actually in your church, but they're in your church, don't expect anything from them. Nothing. Not $1, not a high-five, handshake, fist bump. Don't expect them to pay for coffee. Don't expect them to give, for sure. Don't expect them to sing, which means if we're going to reach people from the Gen X, Y, and Z generation that aren't currently coming to our church, and we do some things that get them in the doors to our church, we need to change the program that we have in our church and the way that we communicate to help them want to come back through the doors. It means changing some language. Here's one of them that we did. Let's see if I can pull this up. Okay, as a worship leader, I used to say this all the time. Hey, stand and sing, and our expectation is this is a time where we participate all together. I said that to you guys this week. This is a participation thing, right? I have expectations for you that I don't have of people who aren't in these doors. So if this room all of a sudden got filled with a bunch of people who weren't here, I'm going to change my language. Let's say, just come, take it in. I'm going to recap some things for you. So instead of saying, hey, come stand with us, sing, we want you to engage. Hey, congregation, sing out. This is the part that you guys carry. That's great for people who currently call our churches home. Here's how we change some of the language. Like, hey, we love that you're here. Here's what we do each week. We do some singing because it's a way that we can express our faith and what God's doing in our lives, no pressure at all to sing along. If you just want to take it in, that's just fine. We're going to put the words on the screen. Whenever you're ready, feel free to join us. Right? When we talk about giving, we say, hey, God's doing amazing things here because of.
We don't want anyone to feel an expectation to give, right? You guys hear this, you use this language. Stop passing a bucket. Stop making someone hold on to something that then they feel guilty about passing. Because if you read about giving in Scripture, guilt has nothing to do with it. It's actually opposite. You want people to give with a joyful heart. You want them to come back. Don't ever even make them feel a little bit guilty that they didn't give. Because they're not going to, by the way. So we'd say, hey, we're making it easy for you to give in other ways, but there's no pressure. Just come. Hang out. When we talked about volunteering, we'd say, hey, if you call this church home, I would even put in there, honestly, I would put in there a time frame often. I'd say, hey, if you've been coming for a year or more, and you call this church your home, then we want to encourage you to take the next step. And here's our 5 values, and one of them is serving others. And we want to invite you to serve others alongside a bunch of people around here. If you've been coming for a year or less, you are not on this list. You're welcome to come and to serve. We have no expectation. It's not even an invitation we're throwing out there for you. Just come and be. That is not the language in most churches across the country. When I come and do an assessment of a weekend experience, most of the time I hear insider language, I hear engagement language, I hear community language, and what we are finding out from what people want that aren't currently way too much time. And by the way, I just said 75 minutes. I know churches that go 2 hours or more, and that's okay if your church is geared toward church people, which might be your church, and that might be okay. But if you want to reach X, Y, and Z that aren't currently coming to your church, and you go more than 55 minutes, you're missing. This is a tough conversation with the senior pastor, by the way. Hardest conversation. hey, God's put something on your heart, but we are going to help you learn how to be as effective as a communicator as you have been in the past with the future. And part of that is learning how to edit and learning how to get better at telling your story in a shorter amount of time. Because the average TV program, I mean, the number one TV program, 15 years ago, 60 Minutes. That was the name of the program. It was an hour long. You take out commercials and things like that. It was still over 40 minutes. You know what it is today? 18 minutes. And the average scene within that, 30 to 45 seconds. If you're telling a story and it's taken 6 or 7 or 8 minutes from the platform, you lost them about 2 minutes in. And the only reason you had them for 2 minutes is because they didn't have anything else that they could do because they felt guilty about picking this up while you were preaching at them. In your parking lot and get out of your parking lot, they're never going to stay in your parking lot or want to come back. If it's not convenient for them to come and check their kids in and then get into service and find a seat, by the way, without an expectation of anything like, giving boxes on the way in or out or any of those. I mean, we're talking about wholesale changes here, so don't just go home and try to make all of these at the same time. But if it's not convenient, you're not going to reach them. I wish it wasn't that way. It's the reality of the scene. If they don't feel like their kids are being nurtured in your environment, not being taught all the depths of theology, So there's 3 things as you were talking that just came to mind. You had a lot of I language. And so we need to make sure we know as a church, who are we? We are the called out ones who are to be out there to make disciples of all nations. So if church on Sunday, or whatever day you choose to go, or whatever the organization is about you, great. If it's about people who aren't coming, then great. You're not going to solve a problem by catering to the people who are already there. And that's a hard reality. It really is. But there are things that we can do to help you continue to grow and to help meet the needs that you have, and we want that. We really do, right? If you're coming, you have your experience of, you said, when I was a kid. I grew up going to church for an hour and a half. We're talking about people who did not grow up going for an hour and a half. So the scenario is different. And if that's not who you're going after as a church, then by all means, get as much material as you can while you have these people who are growing in spiritual maturity, and then don't do that. Don't do that. Grow yourself and then go. Be the kind of church that you are. I'm telling you, it's not going to be a blended service that goes over for an hour and a half. I mean, be at 55 minutes, whatever.
But we would tell people right up front when they sat down at the beginning of the service, sometimes you're going longer than you might be accustomed to. And feel free to get up. We realize you got other things to do. Feel free to get up and just leave, and we're okay with that. And people would do that, and we were okay with that. And then, is that kind of a good compromise, or is that kind of a...
I don't think so. I think it's making an excuse for why you don't fit. I'm pretty... Currently coming, small groups is really a model for the church, in the church. So yes, as people continue to own their membership or their involvement in your church, the values of your church, yes, get them involved in a small group. But I think that for reaching people who aren't currently there, invite them into how they can be a part of. So that's the with instead of for. You know, if you're for something or with something, the younger generations want to be with you in it. So invite them to be a part of something that they're doing good.
You look at all those stories, he didn't do much telling. He did a lot of asking. You read, all through his stories, the Samaritan woman, he knew all the answers, but he didn't act like he did.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we want to tell them the answers.
Yeah. Mm. and to grow and to know and to make a difference in the world, because y'all are leaders. And God's called you to be leaders. He's put it in you, and we can make a difference through some of these tools and some of the wisdom that you haven't even shared. And if you need help with that, that's what I'm here for. That's the convergence that I talked about in my story, is I'm here for you guys. And so if you go back and you talk with your leadership, and like, I think I get what you're saying, but I'm not really sure. Call me, email me, get a hold of me. I want to help your church do this. That's one of the reasons that I'm here, is to be able to say I'm a resource for you. And let's figure out how I can help take your great ideas and build strategies, because that's not your strength. Or I can come in and be a visionary and a dreamer and help you get some dreams into a bucket, and then you guys are great at strategies, so go for it. Or maybe it's systems. I've got some consultants that I work with that are on my team. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to close the time, and then I'm here for discussion, whatever, and we'll go from there. God, this is tough. This has rocked some of us. Some of us don't agree with this. Some of us are processing, and it's going to take the rest of our lives to figure out.